weekly holiday worth celebrating.
Hello there, Internet. Welcome to episode number 5 of Progress Day. It's your boy, Mr. Hobo Card Boy, with Swim and Panda.
What did you just call me?
I called myself.
Okay.
Somebody thinks highly of himself. No, I'm the hobo. Come on. We got Panda here, all groomed up, and yeah, we're back at it. We're gonna talk about a few things. Today's episode will be more of a casual talk on the recent changes to the metagame that have happened after the balance patch, also the new game modes being announced, and all that good stuff. I think there's a lot to talk about, but not so much detail as like last time, in which we just spent like almost 2 hours talking about individual card changes. So first of all, let's actually do a proper introduction. How are you guys doing today?
Very good, very good. Excited to be back after 2 weeks. We're finally keeping actual schedule. This time almost didn't, but we made it. We made it in time.
Well, we're gonna talk about like whose fault.
Mogwai fell asleep.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as Mogwai was getting out of bed, I was getting up. So, you know, they woke me up early. I do like 7 a.m. wake ups for this, and I get informed that Mogwai's just passed out, and I'm just like, okay, me too then.
That makes me come off so bad. Like I'm just
No.
asleep
It was
at 4
great.
p.m.
It was literally it was my saving grace. You guys, I would have gotten like 5 hours of sleep. This was the best news I'd ever gotten. I woke up and I was like, we can do this a little later. Oh, thank God, Mogwai, I love you.
I could tell when I look at the Discord, like I could tell you were happy about it actually.
I was so happy.
It was actually pretty obvious. All right, so yeah, we're gonna start off with the first subject. What are we talking about first, Panda?
So the first thing that happened right after our last episode was the release of this video from developers going over a lot of new features coming to the game. So not exactly cards or anything relevant in that regard, but more hints at features that would be coming throughout, I think, the summer. I think like the next few months, which are the Gauntlets, the labs, the events, and then they also talked about kind of the release schedule for new expansions and also sets of cards, which I think is obviously very relevant as well. So first off, Gauntlets, they are kind of like a game mode with a certain specific rule that changes deck building or changes how the game plays out in a certain way, and it adds an element of fun, and that gets rotated every few X amount of time, every week or every whatever. What's your opinion on that as a whole, as a game mode?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll go. I think it's great. I think it's a really good idea. It's sort of like they have these 2 new modes, and we don't exactly know how they're gonna split them up exactly. But it's sort of reminiscent of like Tavern Brawl from Hearthstone, which is like I think a really good idea. This is one of the best concepts for game modes that you could do. It's really important to like have game modes that keep things fresh without splitting the community or like affecting balance in a major way. And I think that this kind of mode is amazing at that.
Yeah, I really like the message that they started off the whole video with by basically saying, card games can be played in several different ways. We've seen this, Magic the Gathering is a very good example. It's a card game that's been going on for many years, and there's many different ways of playing that game. And I think they definitely are on the right path when it comes to like, doing that with Runeterra. Because some people, even though most of us enjoy Constructed, a bunch of people who play card games play it in a different way. They like draft or they like more of like perhaps potential single player modes with restrictions and stuff. And I'm really excited for them to just like branch out, and I think it's only good news for the game. Like I did a video talking about this, and that was basically my sentiment. Like I really like just gameplay diversity. And I'm really, really excited for these new game modes. I still have a little bit of. I was mentioning this earlier to Swim. I have some difficulty, like, kind of like differentiating them. Like the lab from the events and stuff. Like exactly what will make them different one from another. Yeah. Like it's still hard for me to like grasp. But nonetheless, I'm obviously very excited.
So as far as I'm aware, I think Gauntlets are a very basic kind of one rule change in deck building, or it doesn't make the Runeterra as a whole a complete different thing. It's just the same game, but one thing changes, like with the deck building. I think something simple, labs are much less a typical game of Runeterra and more like a experimental kind of thing with maybe more rule changes or more. You don't start the game on turn one or like weirder rules, so deviating more from the original gameplay that Runeterra offers. And then events I think are like thematic events that are
Okay.
time based, so maybe like a Halloween kind of event or typical like all the stuff that esport games like with the year of the like Chinese New Year and all these different like kind of time based events. I think
the events are the most confusing to me personally. Like the other two are easier to differentiate, but the events are just kind of like I'm not exactly sure how they will be different from the lab. I'm particularly very, very intrigued from the lab. I don't know. I'm a Heimerdinger fanboy, and I like the idea of just I think it can get really wacky, and I'm particularly excited for that one.
Yeah, I kind of want to like get into a little bit what I love so much about these mode concepts.
Yeah,
I actually, because we've all played Gwent and Artifact. I think these are two games that in the past, I mean, they had their own individual flaws. I think a lot of people look at different aspects of them and are like, oh, this is a problem. Oh, they did good here. And people disagree. I would actually say that one of the biggest things about those games that people don't talk about is that they sort of, at a certain point, had a problem with like mode splitting. The biggest thing with Gwent that people don't remember is like draft mode is, I would say draft mode is one of the things that Gwent, that basically put Gwent on the wrong path. Because
okay.
like
I was really I thought you were gonna say the opposite, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna praise the arena. Yeah, okay, never mind. I was like, what? Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
The reason for that is a little subtle. It's just because like I mean, Midwinter Update got all the flack, but the reason they printed a lot of card design to be like that was because they were going to do a draft mode in 2 months, and they were like, okay, our card pool has to be designed around this draft concept.
Yeah.
Artifact fell into the same traps where their draft mode was good because their card design was very, very like linear and scalable, non-synergistic, which works well for draft, but constructed was kind of ass. And if they wanted to make constructed better, they would have had to make draft worse. That's bad. Runeterra is in a good position here because we have expeditions, which are a form of draft that is mostly synergistic, which allows cards to not be balanced or designed in one way or the other. So it's not going to ruin player experience by kind of like forcing the cards to be designed in any weird way. And these new modes are great for that because they keep things very interesting without having to balance the card pool around 2 different modes at once.
And that's very important. I completely agree. I think I actually have nothing to add. I agree.
Yeah.
So my only doubt is how relevant are these modes going to be, because I've seen it with Gwent Arena obviously and with a lot of other card games. These secondary modes that come out, sometimes they just don't gain any traction. They just become completely forgotten about, and no one sees any reason to play them. You can't really compete in any way. Sure, there's the fun element, and the first time, second time, the third time it might apply, but after a while, I think a lot of these modes just get old and not they don't feel fresh enough, or they don't have innovative enough rules, and then people just stop playing them altogether. So how do you guys think Runeterra might address that and might make it something that we want to do every week or every month or every however much?
I think it's gonna depend a lot on just the quality of like the fun quality of the events. I was gonna ask, do you guys have any data on like how popular expeditions are in Runeterra? Because I don't particularly engage in that game mode because I'm addicted to constructed, right? But I'm not sure what the general consensus is regarding, because I've seen like a bit of a split sort of like reaction to it, right? There's some people who I've seen some like high level players say that it kind of like holds your hand a little bit regarding like because of the synergistic picks and stuff. Like it's kind of like more linear when it comes to like building, because it's improvised deck building. At the end of the day, draft is improvised deck building, right? And but I've seen a lot of people who really enjoy the format and also like exclusively play it. So I was wondering if any of you guys know of like what the actual popularity of it is, because it is important to know, because if expeditions, like that's a good precedent for the new game modes, right? If a lot of people play expeditions, then you could assume that people will be playing these game modes a lot too as well.
Well, I don't know any stats. There's nothing public,
Mm.
but it does appear just, in the many months, like talking to people and engaging in the community, it does appear like it's pretty unpopular among like the dedicated community compared to other draft modes and card games. Like even Hearthstone Arena felt like it had more of the community kind of participating in that.
Yeah.
You see Reddit posts about, oh, here's my deck, right? Oh, this draft deck with 7 solitary monks or whatever. A bad example, I guess. But yeah, I do think it's sort of unpopular. To be honest, this is, I don't know. I view this as sort of a good thing, which is I know that's gonna come off like an unpopular opinion, but I've just seen so many card games die because they try to balance around 2 modes. Whereas Expeditions is a good mode for new player experience.
I could not agree with you more. Like that was my biggest issue with Artifact, for example. Like it's very easy to point out like the flaws of Artifact and stuff, but at the same time, like at its core, like Artifact gameplay was really fascinating. It was a nice experience and stuff. But like my biggest gripe with it was the fact that draft was more popular than constructed, and that is a huge red flag, which I will admit I was not as aware to back in the day, but
Yeah.
it's just like if your card game is more geared towards draft than it is towards constructed, you're doomed. Like I have no doubt you're doomed. Constructed should always be by far the most popular game mode, but it is important to have other ways to play the game, right? But I agree completely. Like it's constructed first always, and I'm not particularly like worried about Expeditions having like a low popularity. Yeah. It's not really something that honestly concerns me too much. But I think it is like if it were very popular, it sets a precedent, right? And I'm still very excited for these new game modes, but I will always be playing constructed over anything else by far.
Yeah. At the end of the day, with this sort of thing, I mean, Magic, I think, is the only game that I would say has very successfully pulled off that divergence between like different modes, and Magic has many different modes, and I think that's largely just because like its origins and its physical nature and its like card design, that all of which has a hard time working for a new game in a digital environment.
Yeah, draft is
like
draft is like very social, right? Like I that's how I enjoy playing draft, just with people, like in a table.
Yeah, we've done drafts together.
Yeah,
we were at the Salt Mines one.
Yeah.
That was great.
Good times.
I think the biggest issue with Expeditions is that there's not really a point of playing them now for like the very dedicated players. At the beginning, it was valuable to play them, and if you got to 7 wins, you would get good rewards. But once they nerfed the rewards, I think it became less of a good idea to do your like draft token every week. I think that was part of the decline in how popular it was and how much we were playing it. And yeah, I think it's okay, but I think it doesn't have a huge public that are playing it. Like that's their main thing. Definitely not in Runeterra.
Yeah, I think that like in answer kind of to your original question, Panda, about like how popular these modes will be, I think they'll be fine. I actually don't think that I don't think that we're really able to compare them to Expeditions, because the way I see them playing out is very much the same as like Tavern Brawls and Hearthstone, which is like when they're released, they're fun for honestly usually a few hours. But because different people are kind of logging in at different times, it ends up with like the community being engaged with it for about like 48 hours. There's wacky new rules. Even like super unbalanced metas are kind of fun to figure out, right? And people will play it for 2 days, and then they'll drop it, and next week they'll play when there's new rules, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, I'll definitely play them. Like I'm especially like the lab. Like I'll definitely do that. But it's nice to know that I'll focus on that for like a little bit, and then I'll just go back to building decks and playing on ranked and stuff.
I think one way they could kind of not fix the problem, but make it more appealing for people to want to play these new events is have some kind of like reward associated to the event, either cosmetic or some kind of.
They haven't announced this?
I'm not sure. I think the events themselves, yes, but Gauntlets and Labs, I don't, because they're not like temporary.
Yeah.
More like I'm not sure, but I think doing something like that could be interesting. And for Expeditions as well, having some kind of it would be hard to do leaderboards, because I don't know how Hearthstone Arena does it. It's just like the amount of wins, right?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yes.
It's
so that's like pretty spammy, but some kind of like incentive for competitive players that want to, you know, I don't know, leaderboard or some kind of win rates. I think maybe Arena does with win rates actually, but that could also be a way to get people to more involved with expeditions, for example, and maybe Gauntlets and labs as well. Although those are less competitive, I guess, and more just me. I guess I'm the host. I'll move on to the next topic. I was drinking, sorry.
I was counting the seconds there. I was like, come on.
The other point, aside from the actual new game modes and all this, is the release schedule. Which, if you guys want to remind me exactly how it was, but I think it was expansion every.
Oh yeah, that's what got me the most excited. Oh my god, that
was great.
Whew, yeah, that's the highlight for me. Every 2 months we're getting new cards. Out of it's basically 3 like
so every 2 months cards and every 6 months expansion, correct?
Exactly. Well, new region, basically. Like it'll be like a bigger expansion, but the fact that we're getting new cards every 2 months, oh my god, it's hard to express how excited I am for that. It really, because I've been through, like, obviously we've all been playing like all sorts of card games, right, for a while, and one of the things is especially like I could notice it with like Magic the Gathering, for example, is the first month would be pretty hyped up, you know, after a new expansion, but then it would be, you would have to wait over 2 months more. So a total of like 3 months, and it's not exactly 3 months all the time. It's a little bit more, I think. But basically, the next, like, especially like the third month is when people are just really, really like tired of the set and they're just really dying to see the next one. And the fact that we're getting new cards every 2 months is just so, it's amazing. Like, it's gonna be really, like, obviously the big question is how many new cards are we getting in these like smaller, you know, like these mini expansions, I guess we're gonna label them, right? Like when we're not getting a new region, like how many cards are we actually getting? Nonetheless, I when I saw that, I loved it. I'm really, really happy about that.
Yeah, I expect it won't be a ton. Probably just like 3 or 4 cards per region, something like that. Like somewhere in the 20 to 40 card range.
That's still quite a bit, though. You know, like that's,
it's enough to make a difference. I would say, like, so one of my friends asked me actually recently, Swim, do you think they're changing enough in these like monthly balance patches that they're doing? Right? Like, are they big enough scale? Because they kind of don't feel like they mix up enough sometimes. And I was saying, like, well, the biggest problem with trying to change things more rapidly is because as much as we, the dedicated community, would love to see that kind of thing, people coming back to games, that's a killer for them. It's like they'll come back and they'll be like, oh, their experience is literally load up, they queue for a game, they find out in the worst way possible that one of their cards has been changed. They're not even really reading things. And then they go back. They're like, okay, I have to tweak my deck. They're looking through the builder. They realize more cards have been changed, and they like quit the game because they don't want to learn the new stuff, right? That's like super, super common. So at the end of the day, it's really hard for them to make rapid changes like that. So adding some cards every like 2 months is the best way to keep things fresh.
Yeah, I think it acts like you said, like a kind of like a balance hatch where it changes up the meta, but doesn't necessarily change all the cards. Like, I mean, Gwent's been a big doing a lot of balance changes, maybe not so much, but in the past where they would change tons of cards and like rework cards again and again and again, and it would be very confusing for new players. I think it's just the biggest issue that TFT has, for example, is that when they change sets, that's really a game that you have to relearn everything again, like all these like champions and abilities and synergies and traits, and it's literally like playing the game all over again. So it has a huge like initial learning curve just to be able to play the game at a semi-decent level, which is, I think it's a big problem for it going forward. It's going to be a big issue. And with Runeterra, I think adding these new cards, it'll change up the meta enough where it'll be fresh. It'll like Mogwai said, I mean, card games, the biggest problem is that you had 1 or 2 months, the meta would be solved, and then there's always like the second half of that block of like before next expansion, whatever, where it would be like a chore to play the game and no one wanted to play, and like I think the player amount of players playing the game still like at a daily level would go down like crazy after like the first month or 2.
Yeah, it's definitely like a really great news. I also like want to touch a little bit on the like the Riot approach towards balance. I'm actually a big fan of it. I really like how they're more, I guess the term that I'm searching for here is like cautious, responsible with balance changes. They don't overdo them. And a lot of times, because at the end of the day, like a change to just one card alone can have very big implications if it's like the right change, you know. And I think they've done a great job so far. And I've personally been a big fan of their balance approach, right? And I completely agree with Swim. It's really exciting, not only from like a new content perspective, but also in a way this can kind of like ensure that they don't have to make too many balance changes if they're introducing constant new content onto the game. And I just think it was fantastic news. Like when I saw it, I was super excited, and I still am. So definitely, you know, the one downside you could look at, well, I was expecting, you know, 3 expansions, like 3 big expansions in a year. Like I want 3 new regions. Eventually they're gonna run out of regions to add, first of all, and this is just much better. Like, and I think anybody with like a long experience in collectible card games can definitely will most likely agree. So it's good stuff.
I'm definitely inclined to agree. The one asterisk is we don't know the sizes of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like
sure,
when Gwent started, they were doing, remember the very early months, they were doing like monthly cards, and they just gave, I think, like 20 cards per month or something like that.
Really, that
like
many?
Before it was something like that, yeah.
Okay. I don't recall.
I think it was around 20 per
Okay.
month, and this was before. I don't know if they even had expansions as a concept planned back then. Maybe this was just how they were going to release cards, and you know, it definitely like it felt like it sometimes wouldn't be as impactful. It really just comes down a lot to what kinds of cards they're going to print and how many, because it could be 20, it could be, you know, 60, right? That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It really depends.
So talking about, obviously we're very happy with the frequency of the updates, like you guys said, but looking at the kind of the amount of regions added, etc., do you guys think at a certain point, I mean, we're gonna have to obviously be looking at some kind of rotation with
100%.
cards and with regions?
100%.
Following this schedule, after like a year, there's gonna be a ton of regions, right? Like maybe too much even, maybe.
There's no doubt this rotation will be necessary. I think it's a thing that has to happen in every card game eventually. Yeah. And there's no doubt in my mind. Rotation will happen eventually. How they will address it, if they will give like some perks to the core set itself, you know, that remains to be seen. But rotation will happen in Legends of Runeterra as it grows and grows, because at a certain point the card pool will be just so massive that it will be pretty much impossible to balance things, and it's necessary. And I'm looking forward to it. I'll embrace it. Yeah.
I think one more thing. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
no,
I was just gonna say, I think it will be pretty necessary. There is a bit of a part of me that thinks there's a chance that they might do something, either like a tweak on that, or maybe try to do something a bit different. The thing with Runeterra is, I think the overall approach to the game has actually a little bit of chronic hipster syndrome, which is something that
Elaborate.
I'm intimately familiar with. Well, I've had this problem my entire life where I just, you know, I can't do things the normal way, and that sort of, you know, it's definitely it's a problem for me, actually. You know, when I take a deck, I just have to add some jank cards in it, right?
I share that. I share that syndrome completely.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Chronic hipster syndrome.
I can't play what everybody else is playing. Yeah, that's
exactly.
Fine. There's no point. There's no point. Yeah, exactly.
And
you have to be special.
You look at Runeterra, and they do this among card games. You know, they don't have draft, and they've got expeditions, right? They're every one of their underlying systems is at least a little bit different. The way their regions work, the way that, you know, they're not doing expansions, they're doing new regions, right? I think that in some ways, like some of these decisions, a couple of the decisions do feel like they might be going out of their way to be different. And there is a chance that they'll try to approach the idea of rotations with some kind of tweak or some kind of twist. You know, we'll see. I do agree with you that I think there's pretty much no way to have an ongoing long-term card game without rotations.
Yeah, but they'll take like their own twist to it. Yeah, I could totally see that. Yeah, because everything that they have done is, but at the end of the day, you know, like, I mean, it's not just a matter of name, right? With Expedition, like expeditions are actually different from other.
Right.
That's one of the things that I think is important, very very important for like a card game nowadays to implement, and that's why I wasn't like, again, I'm not trying to throw shade here or anything, but that's why I wasn't a fan of the draft format from Gwent. It didn't really innovate anything, right? And I believe I've heard that they plan on like redesigning it or something, but I really do like, you know, with this game, there's always a sense of novelty to everything they do. Like it feels a bit fresh. So I definitely, it's actually reasonable to expect them to take their own unique approach at something like rotation as well. And it'll be interesting to see how they decide to do so.
And with this kind of the announcement of, you know, the frequency of the card updates and all this being added, I think a very important thing with Runeterra as well is that because the economic model is much more generous, it's not a bad thing to have cards being added so frequently, because some games, there's going to be power creep with expansions, and you have X tier 1 deck, new expansion comes out, there's always going to be 1 or 2 cards that get added to the deck to make it better. And a lot of games that had, you know, typical like booster pack economic model, it made it so that you had to be buying cards and buying, you know, packs from the new expansion every X amount of months, and it became very very expensive very quickly. Obviously Magic is kind of the big thing.
Yeah.
That's one thing where I think that downside won't occur in Runeterra, so it allows there to be very frequent updates and new cards being added, and because you have the wildcard system, it really isn't as bad. So I think that's also something to look forward to going forward.
It's cheap. Cheap is good.
Yeah. So I think that's everything we have to talk about for the video announcement. I don't know if I missed anything. I'm pretty sure we covered everything. Obviously, the last progress day we had, we talked about the patch before it had come out, or the day of, basically. And now we can kind of talk about everything that's happened since then in these 2 weeks, kind of how the meta has shifted. Obviously, some decks became much more prevalent, other decks kind of disappeared because of the nerfs. So let's just go over just casually general opinions. You know, you guys playing on ladder the past 2 weeks, how has it gone? What have you guys been playing, and what has been the general experience?
I'm just gonna say, I don't know if you guys agree, but what a great metagame, man.
Oh yeah,
we have
this is the best meta.
Oh my god, it's easy to take these things for granted, man. But like, I've been playing card games so many years, man, and this metagame is just glorious, dude. There's so many viable decks. Innovating and building your own decks is actually like very possible right now. Like there's so many different strategies you can take, and God, I love everything about it. I've been like one of the champions that has really, it's funny because I was particularly very excited for the Vladimir change, but then through my experience, at least, I realized that like the drain comes into play like 1 out of 20 games, you know, like. But you know what? You know, a champion that really like, oh my God, it feels so much better to me now is Shen. Like the attack boost like made him go a long way. Hecarim has also been really fun to play with as well. You know, minor number tweaks, but I just feel like other factors have also come into play. And yeah, I just found myself playing a lot of Shen without realizing. I even took him out of Demacia and stuff. And I've just been having fun, man, just building all sorts of decks and trying out all these cards. Slotbot is not one that I actually have tried too much. I think it was due to the syndrome you were mentioning earlier, the hipster stuff. Everybody was playing.
As soon as it's popular,
exactly,
you can't play it.
Everybody was asking me, Mogwai, please play Slotbot. I'm like, I'm not gonna face a billion mirrors. Like, no, I'm too special for this. I am above this.
Oh God, Mogwai, you have no idea. You have no idea how much this tilts me on new cards because your stream is right before mine. I can't do what you're doing, right? Because you're playing with the new stuff first, and then it's like people in my chat are like, "Swim, do
European time zone, bitch."
I know, it's unfair, dude. So I have to just do something else.
That's kind of the exact same thing that happened to me with Deep. And in most card games that I've played, I don't necessarily like playing the best tier 1, like obvious best deck. I like playing like the dark horse kind of deck that's like good, can be tier 1, but you're not going to face mirrors. and it's still a strong deck. And that's how I felt when I started playing Deep at the very beginning when the expansion launched. And I made this post on Reddit thinking, whatever, people might enjoy the write-up, but that's it. I didn't know how much impact it would have.
Your deck, at one point,
really
your deck was
gained
everywhere.
A ton of traction.
Your deck was everywhere. And you could tell it was your deck because it had like, people were running Thresh, like the one off of Thresh. Yeah, like at one point it was just like all over the place, yeah.
I think the first week after the patch launched, the play rate was like insane. It was like the most popular deck or something. I think Swim, you also bumped it up to tier 1 on your tier list, which didn't help at all either. So a lot of people were playing it, and I didn't play a lot these past 2 weeks. I was moving and everything, but the little I played, I ran into so many mirrors. I'm like, okay, no, I'm done with Deep for good. I don't want to play it just didn't feel good.
But I believe Swim may have an opinion regarding Deep, or maybe that was just me.
I got sort of like debated.
Okay, here we go.
I bumped it to tier 1 for 1 week ever. It was the one last week, like 2 weeks ago, and it was just like I didn't like the deck. It had an all right win rate. It was pretty good, but everyone, like many other like high level players that I know, were like, "Oh yeah, Deep feels very good." BBG was writing it. Maverick was saying, "Oh, definitely tier 1," and I was like, you know what? It seems like I'm the minority here. I have to put it at tier 1. I can't just be like, "Oh no, my opinion's better."
What do you feel like? What don't you like about Deep? And I'm not coming here from like I don't necessarily disagree with you. I don't play. I played the deck in a tournament, and basically I played a little bit here and there, but I haven't played Deep in a while. So I run into it a lot. And it feels like a solid list from my perspective. It definitely has some weaknesses, but I feel like there's still a lot of meta decks that it just feeds on due to its nature. What do you think?
Fairly solid overall. I would say like it can get quite countered by a couple of things. Like Will of Ionia is still somewhat of a problem for it, and while some of the Ionia decks are falling out, we're seeing elusives coming back in a big fashion. And that's like, for example, one of the bigger counters. I would say like just as an archetype, it doesn't display a lot of tier 1 traits. It's not very flexibly built, which is important. Now you can build it in different ways, but I wouldn't say it's flexible. Those are sort of different properties, because it has a bit of a hard time responding to like the needs of the meta, right? Like it takes a very specific meta to be at the point where you're adding more sea monsters and being greedier, because it just has like too hard of a time balancing that with the defensive game plan. It's kind of, I was talking with Panda before, it's like the problem with the archetype is the more sea monsters you add, the worse it gets. So
I think a big part of it, like you're saying, it's flexible in how you build it with like deck building, because it has so much, like the core of it works a certain way, but then you have like a maybe 10 card flex area where you can add different things to go against aggro, to go against more control based lists, etc. And I think a big misconception people had from the beginning with Deep is that, like, I saw people on Reddit and on Discord and stuff saying that it was bad against Burn. Like when it was running like the full heal, like
it has the best curve, the best early game curve against Burn like I've ever seen.
That was mind blown.
Like the hapless
people saying
into the Toad, into the Wanderer.
Once Burn got nerfed in this last patch, that's why Deep is more prevalent now, because it's like counter. I'm like,
who said that?
It's the opposite.
Who says this?
I said it, actually.
You said it.
Well,
you think Burn being nerfed allows
drama?
I think Deep
drama.
I don't know. There's a big asterisk here. We're not necessarily disagreeing.
Okay.
In the last Meta Mondays video I did, not the last one, because the last one I actually recorded for today, which is okay, don't worry about that. The one I recorded a week ago, I was actually basically saying that and explaining why I felt that was the case, that Deep got better because of that. And it's because even though Deep countered Burn felt like it was still holding Deep back. Even though Deep won that matchup, Burn's existence was forcing Deep to just be, its identity was just, I'm jamming in a bunch of heals, and it's harder for me to win the matchups that I want to play because I have to run, 3 whale, 3 grasp nonsense. And I think it's very interesting that in a meta that can happen. That a deck can counter a deck but still be held back.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like it basically forced the Deep to be more teched against Burn and
hard tech. It couldn't win most other matchups.
Well, I don't. I'm not sure I agree with that because even with the anti-burn tech, like there's many matchups that were still like deep proved to me to be like an incredible tournament deck. Like it felt really powerful for me in Twitch Rivals. Like at a certain point, it was the deck. It was getting banned over my Ionia list because of just how it stomped a lot of stuff. You know, like it's. I still think. I just still think that deck is gonna be prevalent in both ladder and tournament. It's got a lot of things it just crushes.
So, I agree with what Swim said, that it was because burn existed, you were teching for it heavily, and obviously that restricted a lot of your deck building possibilities. And you were somewhat weaker against mid range. It was the same because against mid range decks, all you want to do is stabilize, and healing allows that to happen as well. Even if you're not getting the full value from the heals, you're not getting burned down. Against any mid-range list, the healing allowed you to survive that extra 1 or 2 turn where you got to 7, 8, 9 mana, and you could just turn the game in 1 turn because you got the Nautilus combo plus all sea monsters, and it's GG. Like you would have, if you survived to that point, you won the game, right? So the only list that it was restricted in terms of deck building was against very, very late game heavy control lists, but those are already like pretty unfavored anyway because of Will and most of those decks being Ionia based. So I don't think it was as, I mean, people immediately cutting the whole heal package out of deep this patch because burn got nerfed, I think is a mistake, especially on ladder. I've seen a lot of people putting in like double vengeance, let's put in 7 shipwreck orders, let's go super late game because there's no burn anymore, but that you're making a mistake because against every mid-range list, all you have to do is survive to a certain point in the game, which heal does, and that's it. So when I played the few games of ladder I played after the patch, I took out, one Hapless Aristocrat and maybe one Val Feast and made it a bit more late game teched, but I still kept 2 whales and still kept 2 grasp, and I think that's a correct.
Do you still have the same stance on Lure of the Depths, right, Panda?
Now it's a bit more okay to run it, but I do still think
I don't know. When I see that card, it triggers me. It's just like I just think that card is absolute ass, honestly.
It's so bad.
It's so bad. Like, and you know what the worst thing is? Losing to it. It makes me angry because I lost to like this specific play of like lure into depths into making the Devour of the Depths like 5 mana, and it just happened to perfectly counter my play there, and I was like, oh my god, I don't know. I just think the card is really bad for like it doesn't really contribute anything, and I'm still seeing it a lot in deep decks. Like I don't know, I don't agree with it personally, but
I will say there is going to be a really big tipping point. It's like deep is right now an archetype where, as I was saying, the more sea monsters you run, the worse it is, basically.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Panda was saying. Like, you don't want to be running Treasure Hoarder. You want to be running Grasps, right? I completely agree with that. But there is a point where it's like, if they add one more well-positioned sea monster, like a decent 3-drop or something, suddenly you can run that like an all-in hyper synergy deck with 3 lure, zap guaranteed pulling out lure. It's like there will be a tipping point where it will completely change archetype concepts.
We'll see.
I don't know how close to that we are.
It could be, yeah.
It would need a new card.
It's like for me, like it's honestly hard to say, right? But yeah, we'll see. So besides deep, there have been a lot of very neat decks popping out. One deck that just rose up the ranks and just surprised at least me. I assume it surprised a lot of people. Was all of a sudden like Sejuani just became the queen of the ladder. Like everybody was making fun of Freljord nonstop. And I mean, to be fair, you know, those like the arguments against Freljord still stand. But my God, Sejuani is just proven to be one of the best champions to be introduced with Rising Tides expansion. And the Sejuani plunder list, some label it as Tempo Sejuani, with Misfortune, has just been really powerful and also a very fun deck to play as well. Like I think the deck is a great example of a tier 1 balanced powerful deck, in my opinion at least. I really like it. And yeah, what do you guys think about that deck? There's many others, but I think that deck is the most like impactful. Like it came out of nowhere basically, and Yeah.
It's huge. No, Freljord's like that one kid that just got constantly bullied in school, so it just shows up with a demonetization. Yeah, I will say it did definitely. I was expecting two things going into the meta, and I'm not doing like a I told you so kind of thing. That's not really my point. I was expecting the Karma nerf to be a bigger impact than people thought, and I thought Freljord would be stronger than people thought, because a lot of people were like, you know, after the balance patches, people were like, oh, Freljord didn't get buffed enough. Or people were saying, oh, Karma didn't get nerfed enough.
But Burn.
Looking at those changes, I was like, you know what? Freljord looks pretty good. And Karma nerf is going to be more impactful than people thought.
Yeah.
I was still wrong. I underestimated both of those factors.
Yeah.
Karma nerf is huge, and Freljord is very well positioned in the meta right now. And yeah, it's crazy. Like
it's the lack of like, it's a lack of Burn being everywhere now, right? I think that's one of the biggest factors for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes, Sejuani is just everywhere now. Like not only in that deck, but also like I've seen her being played in this new, because Callista is also rising up the ranks, and I've seen like the newest Freljord version running. It's kind of sad though. Like it's sad when you're playing that kind of deck and you're playing Sejuani over Hecarim. I don't like that, but still, like my God, she's just taken the meta by storm, and she's so strong. Continue. Sorry, I kind of interrupted you there, but
yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing is like she's sort of like the flexibility of Kindly Tavern Keeper, which isn't seeing a lot of play right now, but has the opportunity to like slot in as burn flares. Like metas are just like complex ecosystems, so like having that optional flexibility is so valuable, because that's part of what's keeping burn down. And I know that seems sort of weird because most of the decks aren't running Kindly Tavern Keeper, but if Burn starts running, then like they can put in Kindly Tavern Keeper, and that passive threat is Kindly Tavern Keeper is by far not even close the single best counter to Burn in the game. It's a 1-card counter, baby. It's insane. Yeah. There's nothing that breaks that, and it's
that buff was huge. Like the 3 attack, like the fact that it can just it can eat up Crimson Disciples and Demolitioners and stuff, just straight into them and survive, and it's healing you 3. For sure.
And so the single biggest thing is the biggest thing that Sejuani has going for it is we find ourselves in a mid-range meta all of a sudden, because last meta was dominated by control or stuff like burn. Like you had to play to kill them super early, or you had to basically play to like out heal, because mid-range didn't have the healing tools. Now suddenly control and burn are the ones that got nerfed, and Demacia got nerfed too, which is really important because otherwise, it would just be all Demacia.
Yeah,
but
that's something I wanted to talk about too. Yeah.
Because it's a mid-range meta, and most of the deck concepts, archetypes in the game are mid-range decks. Demacia has been hampering this for so long because they were just assimilating all other mid-range decks. You couldn't play a mid-range deck without it being a worse Demacia. Super important nerf. Exactly. Burn was countering mid-range and control. Like they touched on the 3 most important things that are contributing to diversity right now. And that's why Sejuani has come in. Not because she is a mid-range card. That's part of it. It's because she is a mid-range that counters other mid-ranges. That's why she's spiking so high right now.
I agree completely, and I'm gonna just start by saying, mid-range meta, best meta, in my opinion.
Yes.
I love it. And big, I'm really happy you talk about the Bannerman nerf. Highly impactful. People don't realize how oppressive Demacia Bannerman was to other mid-range decks, because it was the mid-range king, right? So we're not just talking about Burn limiting Freljord from being into action, but also like Demacia took some very big hits. The fact that Badger Bear is actually like not disgusting anymore, and Grizzled Ranger got nerfed as well. It's like if you would have nerfed Ranger's Resolve as well, it actually would have like really put the region in dumpster ranks, I think. So it's definitely a very, very, very impactful change. And yeah, I'm just like, one of the things that I dislike about it though is that I feel like right now Sejuani is it kind of feels like she's the only thing that Freljord has, like she's kind of the face of it. Like it's more about Sejuani than it is about Freljord, and I would like to see, other Freljord champions like kind of like shine.
I mean, Ashe has some playability.
She does.
Lineups.
Yeah.
The Sejuani Ashe Noxus list.
But she's with Sejuani.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But a big
She's
part of the win condition in that deck is much more Ash than it is Sejuani.
Yeah,
like,
for sure,
'cause
for
you're not even playing to level up Sejuani. You're just playing as a
Yeah.
good champion that drops on curve and does what it does well. But
because she frostbites, she helps. That,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's more of a like turn one kill, like one turn kill where you are able to frostbite all the blockers and then just kill them in one basically, with some very good tools like Assessor and draws and.
And
all of
Calling
that. So,
Strike. I think Calling Strike is
Yeah.
one of the main reasons why that deck is as good as it is right now. Like Calling Strike is in
especially
a very
this meta with
Calling Strike. That's what I was gonna say.
Timer.
Calling Strike in this meta, I think I still am a believer that I personally believe that outside of Frostbite, there's no you can't really properly justify Calling Strike. That's my opinion. I think the card is highly counterable, also matchup dependent, but when you add in some sweet Frostbite into the mix, it becomes incredibly powerful with Ashe. And I think yeah, man, I face some like before, when I would face Ashe, it felt like more linear, right? The games against them, like it felt like they didn't have much comeback potential. But now lately, it's not like these cards are new, but for some reason, I think because of the state of the meta and the way the decks are built, I faced some Ashe decks that just have made some incredible comebacks against me, just like Calling Strike into Calling Strike, and then all of a sudden this sweet Reckoning that just board wipes me. And it's Ashe is I think the reason why Ashe because people label it as like a tournament deck, but I think it's gone beyond that. I don't know what its win rate stats actually are, but from my perspective, I think the deck is really solid because in a way, Ashe has always been somewhat of a counter to other mid-range lists, at least decks that revolve a lot around combat. And because it's very scary to attack into an Ashe deck when you're expecting Frostbites and they have such thick units as well. So yeah, what do you guys think about the Ashe deck in general?
Completely agree that Freljord is kind of like just kind of overshadowed by Sejuani as a whole. Its other champions all feel kind of like a little bit. Some of them are like pretty low synergy. I do think, listen, look, not to do the whole like broken record thing, but I think this is partially because they're just kind of bad, but the elephant in the room, Will of Ionia literally counters all of Freljord's champions apart from Sejuani. And you might say,
it also really hits Sejuani hard too. Like Will of Ionia and Sejuani is brutal. Yeah, Will is a good card, isn't it?
I think Will is kind of insane. By the way, when I was saying I don't think Deep has the properties that a tier 1 deck needs, part of that is getting countered by Will. Now that can apply in a few reincarnations. Like right now, the deck that's using Will, that's winning the most games, is actually Kinko Elusive. That's not, Heimer Vi or anything. And I think that there's always, as long as Will exists in its form at 4 mana, there will always be a niche in the market for Will. There will always be a tier 1 deck running 3 Will, at least, and that will limit certain things from playability. But I can't pretend it's entirely because of Will, because the Freljord champions are also just kind of bad on their own.
I think looking at the Ashe deck specifically, the biggest card that is kind of a sleeper, really, really good card is Assessor. And even back, I think Mogwai, you and me talked about it when I did the first balance patch surveys, while it was still in beta. We decided as Assessor is one of the strongest cards in Noxus. And obviously people in the survey itself they thought it was a joke, didn't value it at all. I think it's an insane card, especially with the Trapper version of this Ashe deck. It worked really, really well as well. Without that card, I think, the Ashe deck could not exist because
I agree
very quickly. But with Assessor, it changes the game completely.
Assessor's a difficult card to evaluate though sometimes because it's sometimes it does feel like it's a bit win more, because you do require a board state to trigger it. But
you were talking about the comeback potential. I think that's the card that allows.
Yeah, definitely. No,
to go into the late game.
Tri-Faring Assessor into drawing 3 cards is just brutal. It's crazy. But
because the way this Freljord deck works, the way it can include cards like Elixir of Iron and Brittle Steel and all these low value in terms of how do I explain this? You're using a card slot in your hand for a very weak effect because it's 1 mana. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with Assessor, it allows you to draw into a ton of options and a lot of very cheap options. And because you have so much card draw with Assessor, it doesn't make it a bad thing. You have much more options in hand, but you're not diluting your hand with bad cards basically because you're drawing so many.
Yeah, there's also like regarding other changes. Like I wanted to tackle like the effects of like I mean we don't have to talk much about standalone. It's completely gone from the meta, and it's just like super irrelevant. But I've definitely like I've tried several Ionia builds, and I have definitely noticed the effects of the deep meditation nerf, even though it can be argued as a buff for Heimerdinger specifically. Aside from that, it's just like I've definitely noticed the effects of that, and Brutal Awakening, man, that card also. I mean, we all expected this, but yeah, definitely some big relevant nerfs. The Boom Kuruki one. There's so many games in which you immediately notice it, and then on top of that, Monkey Idol has been a card that I've had quite a bit of fun with, but it's still. I think, in my opinion, it still retains its meme status in a way, but it's been fun to mess around with, and there definitely has been more viability added to it, right, with the changes. What have you guys like, aside from the big changes to the meta and everything, like what have you guys enjoyed with playing the most out of like the cards that actually got buffed and yeah, like what decks have you guys been enjoying?
Well,
basically.
I was personally enjoying the most out of my Fizz all-in deck. I don't remember exactly when I made that deck. I don't know if it was like before the last episode or not. I think it was.
Is it with Demacia or?
No, it's the Fizz Freljord deck. It runs literally no other units other than Fizz and
you play
Starlet.
What I was gonna ask is does it have Starlets here? Okay.
Yeah, it was really really fun. It's not a good deck. I put it in Keck W tier on my site. Yeah. It's really fun if you are into that kind of thing. You can do some like crazy 5-head plays, and you do get like a 20 attack Fizz. You can like one-shot your opponent with it. It's a great counter to Will of Ionia. But that's funny. It's not good, but it's very fun.
Yeah, I've never tried like an all-in Fizz list. Like I said prior, I've personally been having a lot of fun with Shen and Hecarim. I've been playing a lot of Ephemerals. I do personally believe that Ephemerals are better than people give them credit for. I think they're underrated. I'm not saying they're like tier 1, but I do think there's just a lot of very neat things. A card that I feel like people are not respecting enough is the what was her name? The 2-drop. The
Soul Shepherd.
Yeah, the one that gives +1/+1, right?
Yeah.
I think that card got significantly better with Blighted Caretaker. I think Blighted Caretaker with that card, just all of a sudden you're invulnerable to Vile Feast, Make It Rain, Twisted Fate. Like, the threshold between 1 and 2 health is huge for the saplings, and for anything, but particularly for the saplings. And I've been having a tremendous amount of fun. Neverglade Collector is basically my favorite follower from Rising Tides. He's such a powerhouse that the 4 health is so relevant, and he applies so much pressure. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of neat tools Ephemerals have right now, and obviously the buff to Hecarim to 5 attack definitely does help. More so than the extra damage from Overwhelm is just the ability to trade evenly into other 5 health units, which are pretty relevant in the meta. And Shen, man. Shen has really, really surprised me. I didn't think too much of... I've never been a huge Shen fan. He's always felt a little bit boring to me. But there's been some really cool... Like, I had a lot of fun specifically with, like, a Shen deck with Noxus that I built. A viewer gave me the concept idea of combining Shen with Horns of the Dragon and some Stand United shenanigans, and it's actually surprisingly efficient and very fun. Kato's a fun card to play with as well, giving muscles to things. And yeah, man, I really like I like how the buffs have been subtle. They're not like super game changing, but this is perhaps the meta that I've enjoyed the most personally,
by far.
Yeah.
And it's all downhill from here. So overall, card games, if you play card games, you know that there's this card game metas almost always suck. They're almost always just ass. Yeah. And
Magic Standard has been terrible for like forever.
Oh, yeah,
oh my god, it's horrible.
A year, right?
I'm sorry, but it's horrible. Oh my lord.
Right. Anyways, card games never have good metas, but every once in a while, it's like it's a blue moon, that kind of thing. Every like year or 2 or 3, every card game has this one just like golden meta where it's everything is diverse, everything is viable, everything feels great, nothing feels oppressive, and boy, are we in that right now. This is the best.
Don't you believe they can keep it like this though, man? Some optimism, right? Like,
I will say, if there's a game that is set up to keep it like this, it is Runeterra. Yeah. Their design, I think that, like, you know, not trying to dick suck here, but their design is basically like they understand the idea of a meta ecosystem, I think, very well.
Yeah.
And, you know, which isn't to say I agree with every single decision they've made. And I think they've learned a lot in the past, like, you know, 7 months or so.
Yeah.
Because their team is made up of kind of like a lot of like new blood. But I would say that decisions like, for example, no other card game has really done this except for arguably Gwent, which is the idea of just like kind of not really having a push to aggro concept. Now, that is kind of a weird thing to say right now because we come, you know, right after the Shoulders of Burn that has existed for like a month. But it's very apparent that they don't want the idea of aggro to exist in this game. And if you only play Runeterra, that might confuse you because we do call things aggro in Runeterra, but they're not like proper aggro decks. Yeah. Like aggro in card games is literally like burn, and every
mono red in Magic, for example.
Yeah, red deck wins. Just kill the opponent. If my card isn't killing the opponent, it's not in my deck. And this has kind of always been a staple of the card game concept in the rock paper scissors triangle. And I think it's always kind of oppressed them. Runeterra doesn't have that kind of concept. It doesn't.
I agree with you so much. Holy crap.
Games, they get Stockholmed. Games are like, well, we need aggro. It keeps things in check. Well, we need counter spells. It keeps things in check. And I think that can sometimes be true, but I don't think it's conducive to a healthy meta environment. I think Runeterra does a lot of overall decisions that allow it to be not oppressed by things.
Talking about the meta, I think it's been incredible to see that metas have been able to evolve naturally over time, especially like from the closed beta phase where you would initially think, okay, this meta is going to be solved in 2 weeks. People are going to find out what the most OP stuff is, and that's it. But every single week of closed beta, and still now after the expansion, new decks are coming up and new champion combinations and completely new decks and archetypes that didn't exist before. And they're not going to be tier 1, sure, but there's still new decks people are climbing with to, you know, the high win rate, and they're still relevant decks. They're tier 2 decks, but the tier 2 like space is huge, and there's so many options to play that are not going to be the best deck on ladder, sure, but they're going to be viable to play, and they're going to feel good to play, and you're still going to win some games with them. And I think no other card game I've seen has done that. Normally, metas get still after 2-3 weeks. There's 3 or 4 decks that are so far ahead of everything else where they feel optimal to play that, and if you play anything else, you're at a huge disadvantage. Whereas with Runeterra, I think that line is much more blurred. That's a big reason why metas feel so good, and the like you can play for so long and still doesn't get stale. After, like, you know, most card games after an expansion, 1 month after, like Mogwai said, there's like this period
or
where like,
sometimes even like 2 or 3, like 2 weeks.
Some metas get solved very, very quickly.
I've seen, like, with Magic, it's happened, like, you know, like lately with the with Throne of Eldraine and with the Ikoria and stuff, like it's just like a matter of like 3 weeks, and then just people are already fed up. And with this, like, I just want to like mention, I mentioned this in the last episode, but again, for newer players, I think this is important for any newer players watching, is that tier 2 decks are super competitive. Like, just because it's like it's not tier 1 doesn't mean it's not a deck you can use to climb with. Like, tier 2 decks are excellent decks. They're just not quite up there, but they can beat anything, which I think it's important to know, right? Like, when we reference tier 2 a lot, it's a really a deck that's tier 2 is a very strong deck, very competitive deck.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Panda, you were saying there's like sometimes like 3 or 4 decks that just solidify themselves as tier 1 super fast, and that's even generous. Like, it's often 1 or 2 decks that just, like, you know, are just overtaking everything. They've put it into a really good environment. There's so many decks that, you know, we can talk about. For example, there's like, you know, Luxheimer is coming back into the fray. I've been playing that a bit, not a ton. I know BBG's been playing a lot of it. I'm actually probably gonna play it on my stream today. Which is not an advertisement, because this podcast is going to air after that anyway.
I mean, his Twitch is in the description in case you guys want to check it out. I'm just gonna say one thing. I'm just gonna say one thing though. Like, right now, from my experience, especially from my YouTube content, Lux is like really unpopular, and I think it's because of Unyielding Spirit. Like Lux is like really people really hate on Lux now. I don't know. Like I find that surprising because Lux is like the saving grace of Demacia for me.
Yeah.
But people really like whenever I played. Obviously, like audiences are different, right? But whenever I play Lux on my stream, I just get all these people leaves. It's just, I think it's Unyielding Spirit. Like that's the one thing. That's a card that I hope that they tackle in the next balance patch for sure. But yeah.
That is kind of sad. I remember your Monokuma lineup. You were doing like a Lux Thresh.
Yeah, that's
back in the
that's
day.
like my baby, right? Like that's the deck that
Yeah.
I feel pride in, and I really had like it exceeded my expectations. Like I expected it to do well, but it did much better than I expected, and I really liked it. But then I played it the other day, and like I said, I looked at my chat, and all the Pepes were leaving. It was sad, tragic.
Another a deck that I've been enjoying a lot lately because we could spend a while just talking about new decks. It's so
that's what we're here for, man. Just
right.
Just talking about
a deck I've been playing recently. So I started with like They Who Endure, and then I turned it into a very tempo, like aggressive version of They Who Endure with like Keeper and Caretaker, just kind of using Endure as like, you know, just a kill card later. And then I tried it with Noxus, and I ended up with like a Shadow Isles aggro Noxus concept, which has been working.
I know the deck
very well for me. Yeah, it's like when I say Shadow Isles Noxus, you'll think spiders. It's pretty different from spiders. Basically, you're using the Shadow Isles like combo cards like Keeper, Caretaker, Butcher, and then you're using like the Noxus burn package like Demolitionist and Disciple. And you know, you can use like
right too.
Yeah, and 3 Decimates because Decimate.
Fucking hate Decimate.
And then your cards are comboing together. You can use like Demolitionist on Keeper sometimes if you have a bad hand, which is great. You can use like Transfusion on Keeper. So it all ends up kind of working pretty well together with Callista as well. I think that this is definitely an archetype that has potential moving forward. It's going to end up like tier 1 or tier 2.
Callista's just nuts.
The idea of adding that like aggro package from Noxus with Disciple and Demolitionist, I think has always been very appealing because it's not like most other burn cards that you either have to get like the board control early and play them early and aggro out, and then once you get to the higher mana cost and you draw those late, you kind of can't do anything with them. And if you only splash in those cards at any point in the game, they're still going to be great at, you know, just pushing 4 damage and still having like some decent bodies and decent effects on Disciple as well. So yeah, I think I saw that list. I don't know if it was your list specifically or something like it on Twitter like a week ago. And I like that a lot. Like seeing a Shadow Isles base deck with only that splash with Noxus was something interesting.
I have seen that deck. I like the first time that I saw it was somebody like a streamer from my team, Control. He goes by, and I'm pretty sure he like just took your concept and just like changed it a little bit because his was running like Darius, which was just a little bit slower. But it was that's the first time that I see it. Like I didn't know that it was your deck, and
people get so wrapped up in who made a deck and who. People have this weird negative impression of taking a deck and improving it. Now I don't consider Darius to be an improvement, but I'm not going to look.
It's
just a weird mentality that I think ultimately.
No, and I completely agree. But sometimes I am guilty of this because I'm always like it's the hipster syndrome you were mentioning.
It's a hard habit to break.
Yeah, like I'm always like building. You know, like when I build something unique, and when I run into it on the ladder, I'm like, I just automatically say, oh, that's my deck, you know. And some people, it rubs them the wrong way, and I understand. Like it's because there's a lot of players out there, and it's likely that something that you built, somebody who has perhaps much less of a following has also built as well, potentially even before you, and that happens all the time, right? But, I definitely, I think. Like, for example, Crimson Disciple and Transfusion, I don't build Noxus decks without those. Like, I consider that package a staple. I've been having a lot of fun lately with I finally did it. Like, because people were always asking me to do it. I was against it, but I mixed Yasuo and Swain, and it's not bad. It's actually not bad. I mixed it with Crimson. I have Crimson Disciple and Feyblade Twirler as my 2 drops with Transfusion. And Dragon's Rage as a one-off, I like it a lot with Swain. It's pretty funny. And also Might with Swain, I think is a really I think Might is just really good with Swain as a one-off in general because it can just straight up win you games. But it's just that Crimson Disciple Transfusion combo. It just goes. It just kind of like fits everywhere. I think it's so good. I've been a huge advocate of Transfusion for a long time over Twin Disciplines. I feel Transfusion is an amazing card. It always has been. It's a great way. I love playing it in my Katarina deck as a way to dodge removal because a lot of times I'm down to 2 spell mana and my opponent is like, oh, he's not at Twin Disciplines range anymore. But I always have that extra protection, and I just love the card. It allows you to push damage. It's such a nice tempo. And Crimson Disciple is just such a solid 2-drop on her own. Like, she's very hard to block early on. She's a very nasty chump blocker. She also, like, in a way, counters Misfortune and Twisted Fate as well. And the fact that she just does extra work with Transfusion is just icing on the cake. And I really think those 2 cards, I consider them a staple for any sort of Noxus deck, whether you're maining Noxus or you're splashing it. There's always an argument to incorporate those.
I agree.
I rambled there for a bit.
Classic I agree moment in time in every podcast.
There's always one. And it's always me. Fuck. But yeah, man, I've been I also think Callista with Blinded Caretakers.
She's so good, dude.
She's
man,
amazing.
people in my chat are coming in and like multiple people are like Callista at Dan's game. And I'm like, whoa, dude, it's been a while since Callista's been bad. This is like a good champion now. It's like it's not a hot take. Like I have hot takes. Yeah. That's not a hot take. Callista's just good. Like everyone agrees. Like she's just kind of nuts. And also another thing that this patch broke down is just like a lot of the tier 1 decks. Normally when a balance patch happens, it usually isn't enough to disrupt the like hierarchy of the meta. Because like the good stuff gets nerfed. Like things that get nerfed are better than things that get buffed. Because things that get nerfed started at the top and things that get buffed started at the bottom, right? And that's usually how it works. Right now, because the nerfs just applied and I would say just they hit it so perfectly right. The decks that were tier 1 before, some of them just feel tier 3. Karina, Vi, and Ezreal Karma are probably like the best examples of that. Like these decks, I wouldn't say are great to play anymore, right? And then like even Lux Karma, some people are considering that like tier 3 now.
That's crazy to me.
It's
just crazy to me.
It
like
is.
Lux Karma specifically, because that was the king of the past metagame.
Yeah.
And but I'm really happy to see Karina in dumpster tiers. Like I just I never found that deck particularly interesting. That deck was perhaps one of the easiest to play in the game as well, and it was just dull.
The easiest, straight up.
I never saw it too highly. I think Karina's a really cool card. I just never was a fan of that deck, and really happy to not see it everywhere now. It's just like this balance patch has been so good if you think about it, because like the decks that have taken the biggest hit were like the most dull ones by far. And it's been great. Like I think this may have been like the best balance patch to date, honestly. And
it definitely 100%. I will say we are probably about to witness the rise of Kinko elusives. Would be my prediction for this next week.
I've seen it. Like I've ran into the deck a lot, and it's just one of those cases where it's a really strong deck, and most people don't even like remember it right now. But it's definitely it's also a deck that gets really popular too, because it's not super hard to play, and it cheats out a lot of matchups. So we can definitely, and on top of that, it packs full of Ionia, right? Which it helps it out so much. It's just like, because whenever like when people ask me like the strategy against that deck, like I always say, regardless of what you're playing, when you're facing elusives, that game is a race. That's it. It's a race. It's always is. No matter what you're playing, you are racing the opponent. Unless you're playing like Heimerdinger with turrets and stuff, it's a race. You have to kill them before they kill you, and that's basically what it comes down to. And it's a very scary race a lot of times, because they just their units, you can't block them, and they can block yours. So it can be tricky. But that's where I really like cards like Blighted Caretaker. Blighted Caretaker feels so neat against elusives. I love the card, man. I love the Shadow Owls. The Shadow Owls is my favorite region now with the expansion, actually. Yeah. I love Neverglade Collector. I love Blighted Caretaker. They got so many neat toys. And Maokai is super fun as well. I don't know. It's just Shadow Owls is just... I've always been a fan of the design, but I think it's just better than ever because it's actually not broken for once, right? And... It has some really neat play patterns and decks.
My question is...
Oh, sorry. Go, Panda.
Quick question. With the new Endure list, the Tempo Endure list, is that running any kind of heal package with the Shadow Owls cards or no?
Never.
Like Wild Feast,
It plays Collector, right? Or some of them?
Yeah, it usually plays 2 Neverglade Collectors. And depending on the version, you can run any number of Vile Feasts, but very light on the healing. Yeah.
I think a big part of Elusives coming back is that Shadow Isles, it hasn't become irrelevant this patch because Deep is obviously still a thing, but I think a lot of people are playing Deep now without the healing package because Burn got nerfed, and because Burn got nerfed, it's kind of like, okay, everyone reacts to that as I don't need healing, it's fine, and then Elusive's like, hey, I'm still an aggro deck, and I'm really vulnerable to removal because the units are statted in a way where if you're playing for board early with the Elusive key tag, but all the units have very low health totals, and Shadow Owls I think always kept that kind of in check. And when Burn was prevalent, you couldn't play Elusives because even if people weren't teching for your deck was getting really punished because Burn existed at a very high level. And now Shadow Isles being kind of like Karina being gone, Endure, the first week at least of the first week of the patch, I think it really was not being played at all. I think with this tempo version it changed, but at the beginning it wasn't played much at all. Yeah. I think that's gonna, like, Shadow Owls as a whole being less prevalent in some ways, I think allows Elusives to become a much bigger threat in the meta. Yeah,
basically it's the same exact thing with like Demacia getting nerfed. Like Demacia's nerfed, suddenly Sejuani's the new Demacia. Burn is nerfed somewhat. Kinko Elusives is kind of like the new Burn. Yeah, they're just super well positioned right now, and I think like the biggest thing is I might be wrong, I think people are gonna realize that Fury of the North is good in that deck. Most people aren't running it yet. But that's kind of the way that deck should be.
It's like an actual like not ridiculous Battle Fury, and Battle Fury was seen playing Elusives in a lot of decks as a one-off, but it's actually like a plausible Battle Fury, like you're paying 4 mana for it, and you're not tapping out for it. But man, like the one card that really, like, I feel whenever I face Elusives, there's just one card that is just like, okay, this is like the best deck for this card. Like this card is just insane in this deck every time. Is fucking Elixir of Iron. Elixir of Iron in Elusives is ridiculous, so good.
What I mentioned, I mean, the units themselves, the stats aren't, because they're kind of trading off their stats for the elusive keyword, and kind of the whole idea of the tribal tag of elusives is you have less stats, but can't get blocked, so that's the trade-off, you know. And that's why removal was so good against elusives, because elusives playing on curve, if you have the right removal tools, you can literally just pick off one by one, and then they lose all their kind of tempo advantages that we're trying to get on board. And yeah, I think that's like Elixir of Iron really helps with that, for example.
I mean, what you said early on, Swim, like comparing, like early on with Rising Tides, you know, before the metagame, like something that you mentioned that I think ended up being really on point was that Fear of the North is just a better riposte, and it is so good. It is. It's just a better riposte. It's as simple as that. It's just it's really good. It's amazing. It's also like the main reason why I think a lot of the Sejuani Misfortune decks have gone back to the Scouts, because for a period they were playing like the ramp Wolf Rider, but I personally believe that the variant with the Scouts is better, especially because Fury of the North on those Scout units is just it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that now that some of the nerfs have come through on some of the OP cards, out of all the new cards in the game, I think Fury of the North might be the strongest one remaining from the Bilgewater expansion. You might say like Anime Demolitionist, and that's arguable. It's kind of like contingent.
Did you just say Anime Demolitionist?
Yeah, what's her the one?
Yeah, because she has an anime face. I found that. I really like that. I'm gonna call her that now. Yeah, Anime Demolitionist.
Yeah. But Fury of the North is just like it's the one that dodged all the nerfs, and rightfully so. You know, it shouldn't have been nerfed, but now it's just kind of like found itself king of the new cards.
it's great. So were we gonna talk about like the actual like mobilytic stats a little bit and
yeah, I mean we can
Sure.
we can brush on those
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. I think that they're kind of like interesting. I obviously, I do these weekly meta reports, so I'm always kind of keeping up to date on the stats and trying to evaluate them. And you always have to sort of, it's very arguable how to interpret them because you can generalize stats, but it's like, there's different variations of the deck and different point ladder. But the final results we came in with, and this is how I decide the tier list, are basically like right now we're seeing like Yoink Sejuani, which has proven to be more favorable than Tempo Sejuani. The difference being the Yoink package is at 60% alongside Kinko Elusives and Ash Sejuani. All three of those are 60% decks. And you'll note two out of three of those are Sejuani. 3 out of 3 of those are Freljord. Just keep that in mind. That's pretty crazy.
What's the play rate like for those decks? Was it a sizable amount?
Yeah, for Yoink Sejuani, it was high. For Kinko Elusives and Ash Sejuani, it was kind of like middling, although Kinko Elusives is spiking. I predict Ash Sejuani will actually probably be like tier 2 next week. I don't think it'll be able to maintain. But yeah, Freljord is in right now. So
well, but I mean, like, to be fair, with the elusives deck, Freljord is just basically there for buffs, right?
It's true.
But yeah.
But
so.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people realize that Freljord is fine right now, but even then, like they might not be aware of how in it is right now. Like it does kind of have the highest win rates across regions with these decks. Like Tempo Endure is another deck that has a ridiculous win rate.
That's hilarious.
Depending on the version you're looking at, can be anywhere between like 58 and 62% win rate. That's like Freljord actually has the highest win rate on ladder right now out of all the regions. It's so crazy.
That's so funny, actually.
Right.
That's hilarious. That's ridiculous. And
yeah, and then we've got, Heimer Vi and Burn, kind of like the two PNZ decks, also in tier 1. I would say at like 58, 57-ish% win rate.
And I'm gonna plug my girl Katarina here. You mentioned this to me earlier, and I want this to be on record. It's
okay. Yeah, I was saying Mogwai's Kattering Ram deck, it does actually come in hard on the stats. It does. It was hitting a 57% win rate across like a 400 sample size, which isn't high, but it's relevant. It's higher than a lot of dismissible stat points. I was actually looking through the different regions, and I was like, 57% Zed Katarina. This is some kind of like new like Elusives Noxus aggro version that's doing really well. Let's see what version it is. I click on it, and it's Kattering Ram. Like that kind of playstyle of deck could actually be like a new breakout. It's very possible. And then on the lower end of sorry, what were you saying, Ben?
How many of those games are Mogwai's then? Mogwai, how much have you been playing the deck?
I basically like what I was telling Swim is that I always like I only unfortunately spend like 3 to 4 hours on every deck because of my YouTube. Like I'm always switching from one deck to another, so I never, which is one of like it's like the main downside for me from like being a content creator, that I don't get to just like grind one deck, right? So I don't have that many games with it because I spent like 4 hours on a stream one day. I did really well with it. I climbed. Every time that I pick that deck, I climb, but because I have a lot of experience with it, and I think one of the things about Katarina as a whole is that she's not very intuitive, because she does represent a tempo loss. So knowing when to commit to her is very important, and that's something that a lot of new players don't know how to do. So I've always felt that she's been underrated because of this. But I don't have a big sample size with her myself, because I don't have a big sample size with any of my decks because I'm constantly switching from one to another.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think that I do want to touch on this idea of sample size. It's very important. I wouldn't dismiss your own. It depends how you're looking at it, right? If you're piloting a deck and you're consistently feeling good in spots, if you're counting like spots and positions, then your sample size is much bigger, right? And that's a difference between piloting and looking at stats, because when you're looking at stats, all you can look at is win-loss.
Yeah.
And if you're going by your own experience, then if you're going by win-loss, then your sample size is going to be ass. Like even if you play the deck a lot, but if you're like spot counting, if you're just like thinking, oh, am I constantly feeling dominant in matchups, your sample size can be very relevant. I wouldn't dismiss it if that's your perspective.
Yeah, no, like what I personally like about the deck is that it's it has some really sneaky ways to punish greedier strategies. The continuous threat of like rally effects is really strong against slower builds, and one would say that, you know, this sort of strategy is like less prevalent in a mid-range meta, but that's actually not true. Like battering ram has less answers now in this meta, and basically because you're packing Ionia, you're also able to, you know, disrupt the opponent's disruption in a way, and I really like it. I also really like how the buff to Katarina made it like actually synergize with Ravenous Flock. Like I think that's a very neat detail, like the fact that you can play Katarina and you can enable Ravenous Flock onto anything with your Blade's Edge. There's a lot of cool things. I don't know. I'm biased towards the champion. I really like her, and it was cool to see that people are playing the deck and they're doing all right with it.
Yeah. One thing I will say is that I'm feeling pretty bearish on Kinku in particular right now, and the reason
on what?
Kinku Wayfinder, just the card.
Yeah.
And there's a few reasons for that. I mean, the Freljord deck is putting even more Freljord cards, so the odds are worsening. The opportunity cost is increasing. Cards that were kind of all right for a while, like Twin Disciplines. I hate Twin Disciplines. It's felt necessary in some decks, but it's not a good card on its own. And when you're going deeper into region number 2, you can cut it. I do think there's a good chance that the path forward for elusives is to mix with another region and get out of Kinko Wayfinder entirely, or even potentially staying in the same region. You could maybe stay in Freljord and get out of Kinko Wayfinder.
I see no immediate reason why elusives would not work with something like Katarina, for example. Like if you
Exactly, and that's sort of another bit of a prediction of mine that I think in the next week we're going to see a lot of these like aggro decks. I'm personally going to try, and I know some people have already messed around with the idea of like Ionia Shadow Isles, combining the Shadow Isles tempo package, you know, with Keeper and whatnot, with some of the Ionia tools like Elusives, Green Glade Duo, as well as Will of Ionia. We've seen that in the past in like these tempo style, like teal red sort of versions, which are not the same as ephemeral decks, but they could run some ephemeral packages. You can be running Haunted Relic, works very well with Duo in some ridiculous situations, and Soul Shepherd and Katarina. I don't think I would run too deep into elusives, but like Relic, Soul Shepherd, Katarina, or Callista, sorry, not Katarina. That sort of thing can be very good. Or you can combine Ionia with Noxus. I personally don't think I would run Battering Ram there, but I think there's a lot of potential in just like Ionia Nox aggro, and that's also been played a lot.
Yeah, I think I've seen some lists on Twitter in the past week running some kind of like mishmash of elusive with aggro package and kind of like burn version 1.2, kind of like, you know, adapting to the changes to burn and then trying to find different avenues to play burn in a different way. And some lists looked interesting. I'm not sure if good or not. I haven't played them or tried them out myself, but I think there are ways to explore pairing elusives with different regions and making that a viable strategy as well.
Yeah.
Turns out elusive is still a broken keyword. Who would have thought?
But it's just like, it's crazy. We're 2 weeks into the meta after the balance patch, and it still feels like a new frontier. It still feels like there's ways the meta is going to move forward in terms of not just like shifts from tiers, but in terms of new color combinations that everything's been tried before. There's nothing like truly new, but things that haven't been tier 1 before, or things that haven't been built exactly how they're being built. It's just like, what I'm going to try out today is an idea I've tried in the past, which is the idea of like an all-in Heimer sort of combo aggro deck. I don't know if you guys have seen this in the past. It doesn't run Lux, but it does run Demacia. My version I was running back in the day,
Relentless Pursuit?
Yes.
I've always loved the concept of Heimerdinger with Relentless Pursuit. Like I would add Pursuit to just like, not like a specialized version like you're saying, but with Lux. Because I always felt like the card is ridiculous with Heimerdinger because it gives you an elusive turret. And I know Panda's not a fan of the fact that Heimerdinger's 3 mana spells are elusive turrets. But yeah, like sorry for interrupting you, but I think I've always thought that's a really good card with him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's this is a deck way back in the day. I think I was like number 4 on ladder with this deck, and the idea was to tutor Heimerdinger. It was basically unitless.
Oh, I remember this with Vanguard Redeemer. Yeah.
And then spells that summon units like Jury Rig and
concept,
Succession, so that we could just get the Heimer into our hands. And that kind of thing actually feels like
Succession, another fantastic card with Heimerdinger.
Yeah.
Another great card.
So yeah, I'll try that out. It just like there's so many things that just work.
Dude, I always have like I don't know. There's just like the fact that like one of my favorite decks that I built recently, like I said, was like I've been having a lot of fun with Shen personally. I think Shen is in a very decent spot right now just because of his stat line. I don't know. I like the fact that he has 3 attack, and I love the Shen Horns of the Dragon deck. It was so fun. Just so fun. I'm always pushing for fun factor above anything, right? But it just feels like there's so many possibilities now, and they can all be viable in their own way, and it's just a great man. I've been playing card games all my life, and I've never felt in a situation like this. You know, it's just really exciting.
Yeah.
So talking about things that work, there's one thing that doesn't work apparently, and that is the Masters MMR system apparently on ladder. It is impossible to get rank 1. It is currently an impossibility, no matter what your win rate is.
Which is why I'm not rank 1, by the way.
Same, me too. Everyone is always coming into my chat and comments, and they're like, "Swim, why aren't you number 1?" And I'm just like, "Well, due to an MMR bug, it's physically impossible."
The game is against this.
Yeah,
it's against this.
Do you guys think this has a kind of a big deal and something that they should look at fixing as soon as possible? Because I mean, right now
they're gonna fix it. I've seen them address this on Twitter. They're definitely aware, and I think we could definitely expect a fix very soon. I'm not sure when, but I would expect it.
Okay, that is obviously a big topic for competitive players. That kind of right now the fun aspect of Runeterra I think is doing really well in terms of the meta being very changing all the time, new decks, etc. But the competitive aspect is kind of lacking and failing because there isn't really any incentive to grinding, because you really can't grind. Like, you could play for a bit, but you're just going to go from 300 to 400 around there and then not move up much more than that.
For anybody like watching this wondering what's wrong, is like I believe when you reach around like top 20, you just basically don't you don't advance. Like, you're stuck there. You hit a wall and you just can't. Like, maybe if you win like 500 games in a row, you'll get there. But you know what I mean? Like, it's the moment you lose a game, everything you've done is out. Yeah.
The fact there's no decay, so you're incentivized to camp. I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is correct, but I think Mago might still be number 1 EU because he just hasn't played on that account for a month or something. I think
That's ridiculous.
It's absurd.
Well, why isn't there the decay system implemented? I always found that really confusing. Isn't that that's necessary, right?
I think it probably is necessary.
It's also interesting because they do have it in TFT, so obviously the developers are different for Runeterra and TFT, but it is the same parent company, and you would assume there are some things that may be similar, like we talked about before, with the esports possibly following a similar route. So there is a decay in TFT, and I'm not sure why it might not have been implemented yet in Runeterra. I think they haven't really taken a proper look at the ranking system and gone all in trying to fix it and get the final version yet. I think they've been focused more on the cards and the expansion, etc. But at some point, I think they do have to address the system and try and find out what the issue is and how to fix it, and have an actual working ladder that benefits players that want to compete and want to grind for the top ranks and not just for tournaments, for example.
Yeah,
I agree.
Me too.
Gotcha. Back
so
to
this
that.
is how it feels.
Yeah, this is how it feels.
That's the first for me.
Get wrecked. All right, so I think I like this episode a lot. I think we talked about a lot of things, and it was more chill. No specific structure. We just kind of rambled for an hour and a half. It was a fun ramble. Sweet. So I think that'll do it for today. So basically, if you're playing Runeterra right now, enjoy the golden age. I'm actually feeling optimistic. I think this is just the beginning. I think, if they keep doing things the way they're doing, we could have just constant, healthy metagames back to back. Obviously, maybe I'm being a little bit too naive here, but no more unyielding spirits and stuff like that. And yeah, man, I'm loving the game right now, and I'm excited to just keep on brewing and just having fun. So yeah, we'll be back at it a couple of weeks from now. We will probably be discussing the upcoming balance patch, which happens. When does it happen exactly?
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now. So perfect, calculated.
I mean, that's how the podcast works. Mogwai. I mean,
yeah,
we set it up. So
I totally knew that. Okay, thank you for putting me on the spot, Panda. And
You say it like you're surprised, like, oh wow, what a coincidence.
Okay.
It lines up perfectly.
I forgot. Jesus, I didn't know. But yeah, that's fantastic. So we'll be talking about the next balance patch. We could definitely expect it to be a big one because I believe Riot has said in the past that you know, they focus on one of the earlier balance patches. They focus more on numerical changes, but from this one we could expect some actual card redesigns, and that's always very exciting. That's kind of like a mini expansion in a way, right? So really looking forward to that. So thank you guys for stopping by and doing this. As always, it's been a pleasure. If you guys have anything to say, now is the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do a website that's, I think, very helpful for a lot of players, whether they're new or intermediate. It's swimstrim.com, and it has all the like, you know, I keep my tier list up to date, and I've got like a pretty helpful matchup tip section. I'm not gonna like plug my like YouTube or my Twitch because I think that's kind of like, oh, look at me. But the website is a very helpful
I'll
tool.
plug it to you. Swimstrim. In the description down below, you get his YouTube and his Twitch. He streams like 5 days a week, or I'm not sure how many days.
In theory, it's 7. In theory.
Okay. I take 2 days off. I need the
lately.
breaks.
Yeah, I've just been kind of like, I don't know. I'm in a bit of a funk. Quarantine's getting to me, I think.
I mean, it's getting to everybody. But yeah, like he streams regularly, uploads on YouTube, and Panda streams once a year, but that may change soon.
We're getting closer. We're not quite there yet.
Oh my god.
Yeah, not quite there
I have
yet.
moved flats.
Yeah.
I got the new internet installed today, actually. And a new PC is on its way. Once I get that going, maybe next week we'll finally get there, but we're getting closer.
Oh boy.
Oh.
It's happening. So yeah, thank you guys so much for sticking around. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's just really fun to do. I just love rambling about card games for like hours. And that's all I gotta say. Stay tuned for the next episode coming in a couple of weeks. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Leave a comment with any sort of feedback or just anything that you want to contribute to the discussion. What do you guys think about the meta and all that good stuff. And that's all I gotta say. Have a soul day. And we'll see you next time.